2019 Hong Kong anti-extradition bill protests June 9–March. Daytime rally. Before the government tabling the extradition bill for second reading in the Legislative Council on 12 June, the Civil Human Rights Front called the Hong Kong people to come out against the bill on 9 June. The march started from Victoria Park, Causeway Bay to the Legislative Council and Admiralty, an approximately 3 kilometers (1.86 miles) route. Chanting "Scrap the evil law, oppose China extradition and Carrie Lam resign" in white to symbolize light and brightness and justice, protesters brought Hong Kong Island to a halt from early afternoon until late at night. The MTR enacted crowd control measures in which the police ordered trains not to stop at Wan Chai, Causeway Bay and Tin Hau stations for several hours. Protesters had to get off at Fortress Hill in order to join the protest from there. Police urged protesters to march from Victoria Park before the 3 p.m. start time to ease overcrowding. During the march, there were several times when protesters come to a standstill due to the limited road space. People demanded that the police opened up more roads. It was only after some protesters climbed over a metal barricade and walked on lanes originally reserved for traffic that police opened up all lanes on Hennessy Road, having previously refused to do so. A huge number of protesters were still leaving Victoria Park up to 4 hours after the start time and were still arriving at the endpoint at Admiralty 7 hours after the protest began. CHRF convener Jimmy Sham said that 1.03 million people attended the march, the largest protest Hong Kong has seen since the 1997 handover, surpassing the turnout seen at mass rallies in support of the Tiananmen protests of 1989 and July 1 demonstration of 2003. The police countered with an estimate of 270,000 at its peak. Evan Fowler of the Hong Kong Free Press noted that the police had become notorious for using highly selective methods to significantly underreport numbers, but that the demonstration was beyond doubt the largest one-day protest in Hong Kong's history. As a counter-protest, more than a dozen ships carrying banners with slogans supporting the bill cruised Victoria Harbour. Around 20 supporters from the Safeguard Hong Kong Alliance, a pro-Beijing activist group, also showed up at the government quarters to support the bill few hours before the anti-extradition bill protest. Nighttime clashes. Hundreds of protesters camped out in front of the government headquarters well into the night, with more joining them in response to calls from Demo Sisto and pro-independence activists. Police formed a human chain to prevent the protesters from dashing onto Harcourt Road, the main road next to the government headquarters, while the Special Tactical Squad, STS, stood by for potential conflicts. The Civil Human Rights Front officially called an end to the march at 10 p.m., however, around 100 protesters remained at the Civic Square, the East Wing forecourt of the central government office. At 11 p.m., the government issued a press statement, saying that it acknowledges, and respects, that people have different views on a wide range of issues, but insisted the second reading debate on the bill would resume on 12 June. In response to the government's statement, several members of Demo Sisto staged a sit-in protest outside the Legislative Council complex demanding for a dialogue with Carrie Lam and John Lee, while pro-independence groups, Student Localism and the Students' Independent Union, called for escalating protest actions if the government fails to respond to their demand to withdraw the bill. A standoff with police around midnight descended into chaos as the tension went high. Clashes broken out between thousands of protesters and officers at the Legislative Council complex as protesters threw bottles and metal barricades at police and pushed barricades while police responded by pepper spray. Anti-riot police arrived to the scene and charged back at the crowd and secured the area, while police on Harcourt Road also pushed protesters back on the pavements. Clashes shift to Lung Wo Road as many protesters gathered and barricaded themselves from the officers. Several hundred protesters were driven by officers to Lung King Street in Wan Chai around 2 a.m. and then moved on to Gloucester Road while chanting "No extradition to China." The South China Morning Post commented the night protest is the scene of bigger clashes during the 2014 Occupy protests for greater democracy. The number of protesters gradually dwindled around 3 a.m. 19 protesters were arrested, while 358 protesters in Wan Chai were hemmed in against the wall of the old Wan Chai police station surrounded by a large number of officers and had their identity recorded, 80% of whom were younger than 25. Following the clashes on early 10 June, Lam in the next morning stated the size of the rally was admittedly significant, and showed there were clearly still concerns over the bill but refused to withdraw it. She refused to draw into the questions of whether she would fulfill her promise that she would resign if mainstream opinion makes me no longer able to continue the job in her 2017 chief executive election campaign, only saying that it was important to have a stable governing team at a time when our economy is going to undergo some very severe challenges because of external uncertainties.